The Irradiated Legacy, by guest author February 17, 2023, guest article by Berk Gümüs.
Use of uranium munitions since 1991 in the wars of the U.S. and its allies in Iraq, Bosnia, Kosovo, Afghanistan, Somalia, Lebanon and Libya, and now in Ukraine. Consequences: radioactive contamination with high rates of cancer and leukemia, death and miscarriage, including heavy metal poisoning in the affected countries, as well as among soldiers in the war zones. The uranium weapons are poisoning and irradiating our Earth and all life. This wonder weapon penetrates an enemy tank like a knife through butter. In the process, the radioactive uranium, which is also highly toxic and has a half-life of 4.5 billion years, burns into tiny nanoparticles. Inhaled, they can cause deadly cancerous tumors and deform the genetic code of all living beings for many generations. In affected countries, this has now made entire regions uninhabitable. It serves as an armor-piercing projectile because when it strikes the armor turret, it generates immense heat, causing the projectile to literally burn through the steel. This property is also known as self-sharpening. Inside the tank, the projectile is so hot that it ignites the air and causes the stored ammunition to explode, meaning the occupants are incinerated within moments and then completely irradiated, as is the tank. The abrasion and pulverization evaporation of the uranium results in radioactive particles in the nanorange flying around as dusts. Particles lying in the nanorange cannot be selected out by any filter system in the world. These dusts behave like air and can be carried with the air currents everywhere. The military assumed with the introduction of these munitions that the radiation particles mix so much with the air that they do no harm and nobody notices them. The German tropical physician and epidemiologist Dr. Sigvard Horst Gunther was the first to draw attention to the devastating consequences of such uranium shells after the Gulf War in 1991, and was discredited and persecuted for it in Germany. He and his American colleagues conducted investigations in Kosovo, Iraq, and Bosnia. After the end of the recent Iraq War, the experts discovered contaminated war sites in the vicinity of Basra, whose radioactive contamination exceeds the natural Earth radiation by a factor of 20,000. On December 2, 2008, the agenda of the UN General Assembly included a motion to ban uranium munitions. 141 nations called for a future ban on the production, proliferation, and use of uranium munitions and weapons based on international law. It was not surprising that the nuclear powers France, Great Britain, Israel, and the USA voted against. Russia abstained, and China did not participate in the vote. A resolution was issued to the responsible UN organizations to review the health consequences, but without success because NATO largely determines the program. In 2013, the World Health Organization tried to downplay DU contamination in Iraq. DU stands for depleted uranium, or also called nuclear waste. Remarkably, in contradiction to numerous evidences, the WHO reported that the results on spontaneous abortions, stillbirths, and congenital birth defects in Iraq are in line with or even lower than international estimates. The study provides no clear evidence suggesting an unusually high rate of congenital birth defects in Iraq. As early as 1991, after the Gulf War, Professor Gunther had noticed people in Baghdad University Hospital with symptoms of illness he had never seen in his 40 years of work in the country. He also examined many malformed infants and children, most of whom did not survive long, and documented the cases. He diagnosed severe kidney and liver dysfunction, cancer, and genetic damage. After similar symptoms appeared in American and British Gulf War veterans and their children, the connection was clear to Gunther and many other scientists. They called for a comprehensive ban on this ammunition, which is part of the standard armament of U.S. troops.
294th contact Saturday, The 3rd of February 2001, 011, HRS.
That is clear, thank you. Then to the next question. What about the use of uranium ammunition in the Gulf War and the Kosovo-Serbia War, which since then has led to many soldiers and civilians falling ill with leukemia and dying of leukemia? Is that true?
That is unfortunately the sad truth. But to make the whole thing understandable to the non-scientifically educated as well, I have to explain it in a simple way. Uranium is used in wartime projectiles to achieve greater penetration of the target object, so that even tanks and thickest bunker walls can be cracked and destroyed. This process separates from the uranium nucleation of wafer-thin dust, which floats around or is stirred up when humans or animals come into the area of the uranium dust and inhale it, causing them to fall ill and often die. One of the main causes of this disease is leukemia. However, it must be said that it is not uranium alone that is the decisive factor leading to the fatal diseases, but rather the plutonium with which the uranium projectiles are impregnated. Plutonium is the real great danger factor.
That can be understood. Expert talk would only lead to a lack of understanding.
I agree with this view. It has to be said, however, that those responsible for the use of ammunition deny or trivialize everything, of course, both those responsible for the Americans and those of NATO. But this is well known.